This is a perfect controller. So is this. And so are these. Yet, important people at Nintendo have said that they are striving to create the perfect controller for next generation. Let's talk about that. I want to try to do some things that are a little different from what we usually do here. First of all, I want to present you guys with the same question before and after watching the video to see if your perspective changes at all on the issue at hand. That question being, is a perfect controller possible? The next thing I want to try out is creating curated playlists that are related to the topic of this video for more content for you guys to watch after you finish watching here. This playlist will be made up of videos that are on our channel and other channels that we like. As always, your feedback is very important to the videos we make and the changes we make to the formula that we have here moving forward. So if you have any feedback that you want to give, feel free to do that in the comments. If you enjoy what we do here and want to see more of it, be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, and all that fun stuff. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, let's move on to the video. In their 79th annual general meeting of shareholders Q&A session, Nintendo executives, including Shinya Takahashi, a lead producer on some of Nintendo's biggest games, most recently Super Mario Maker 2, and currently the manager of their biggest internal development team, EPD. Ko Shioda, who is the general manager of Nintendo's hardware development division, PTD, he's had a lead role in creating their home consoles dating back to the Wii. And Shigeru Miyamoto, who you all should know on some level at this point, were all asked, looking at this year's E3, it seems like the mainstream for video games is the same as it has been for the past 30 years, namely looking at the screen and playing with controller in hand. How do developers regard this, and do they think it will continue? In response to that question, all three executives had insight that's related to what they offer Nintendo on their day-to-day job. And I think all of those questions' answers in tandem can give us a good idea to the answer to the question presented in this video. Starting with Miyamoto, who I think has the unique ability to speak to the nuts and bolts of Nintendo's gaming history from a top-down level, and he spoke to this in his response, which can be summarized as, Nintendo established the basis of the modern game controller standard with the innovation of the D-pad and the NES controller, and the first analog stick with the advent of Nintendo 64 amongst other things. He feels like the industry should graduate from these concepts, and because of their role in those innovations, Nintendo is uniquely equipped to contribute the next evolution in video game controllers. A lot of people scoff at Miyamoto when he makes comments like this because in recent years, Nintendo has gotten this reputation that they've fallen behind in technology. I think this is a bad take. You'd have to know very little about how the game industry operates to not know that a company of the size and significance of Nintendo makes a conscious decision to opt out of using certain technology, not because they don't understand it, but because they seek out technology that supports the games they want to make, as well as opting out for the tech that will keep their production costs down, rather than just chasing after the bleeding edge for the sake of it. They get all of the same tech pitched to them as the other major players in the console space. They just choose not to use it a lot of the time. This has always been the case for them since the days of the Famicom, and it will always be the case for them far into the future. However, making the leap in controller technology has always been front and center in their minds, and they never hesitated to do so. To date, Nintendo is offering the most technologically advanced standard console controller in the form of the Joy-Con. It may not be everyone's ideal controller, but objectively it is the only controller that boasts technologies like NFC, HD rumble, motion and infrared sensors, and a 20-hour battery life to boot. That said, his comments do confuse me a bit, and that's in part because of the comments made by Takahashi, which, to paraphrase again, were, Nintendo is always thinking of new things in hardware development that are driven by what the software teams want to work on. Shioda had a similar comment with more of a hardware development focus, which, again to summarize, was, the hardware team is constantly testing new concepts for the next evolution in gaming controller interfaces. Most of these concepts will never see the light of day because the ones that do will be limited to the ones that prove they can yield fun, usable controls for the games they want to make. These comments allude to the reason why I'm skeptical when thinking of the idea of a perfect controller, especially one made by a company like Nintendo. If software drives hardware, then I'd say it's impossible to make a single perfect controller because all software is designed differently. Some may think the solution to this problem is to create a jack of all trades, but as many people will point out with the Joy-Con, this approach has real consequences for certain genres. Specifically, 2D games are affected by the Joy-Con form factor. It's for this reason that, in retrospect, I would say the NES controller isn't great or the N64 controller isn't great because they couldn't facilitate as many game types as most modern controllers can. Even on the topic of more standard controllers like the PS4, Xbox One, or Switch Pro controllers, everyone has their own ergonomic preferences. I prefer the offset analog stick layout of the Xbox controllers. Some people prefer the more aligned PS4 layout, or the overall shape of the controller or size, so on and so forth. No one controller can be perfect because that would assume player preference is a circle and not a multi-layered Venn diagram. That said, even this problem has had somewhat of a solution in recent years with modular controllers like the Xbox One Elite or SCUF controllers. However, I'd hardly even call them perfect controllers because cost is a huge factor in console gaming. After all, a large swath of console gamers buy into consoles specifically because it's a cheaper alternative to PC gaming, and like I mentioned before, Nintendo is normally hesitant to jump on board of a given technology if its price is too high, presumably for this reason. I would say that this is probably the route that they're going in, if any, because for one, Nintendo hasn't offered a single standard option for controllers since the GameCube era. They've consistently offered multiple options for controllers on their consoles, and I don't think that'll end with this generation. In fact, the Switch has already shown a path forward. I think the closest we would get to a perfect controller would have to be one that allows for modularity, but at a cost that's manageable. With the one specialty Joy-Con that has been released so far, this approach has shown to be something that you aren't forced to buy or pay for out of the box. The newest Xbox Elite controller is nearly $200, and while I would say it offers enough to warrant that on paper, not everything it offers is something everyone would want or need. With Joy-Con, if you feel like you need a better D-pad, you can buy the controller. If not, then you don't need to spend the money. This could even be a solid way to implement future technology in current controllers. You wouldn't need to buy a new controller if you could upgrade the hardware PC style at a relatively reasonable price. However, modularity has its own host of problems, including build quality, fragmentation, and cumulative price. So while I believe it would lead to the closest thing we'd get to a singular perfect controller, I don't believe close is good enough to even deem this a solution for a definitive controller. With all of that said, the core of the investors' question at the Q&A meeting had a lot to do with Nintendo's plans to innovate on the way we play games, not just the controllers we use to play them. Could we possibly be introduced to a control input that would improve the way we play games in the same way D-pads or analog sticks did? I'm in the camp of people that believes that consumers don't know what they want until you give it to them. We didn't know the D-pad would revolutionize games before it did. We didn't know that SNES shoulder buttons would inspire an industry standard either. We didn't know touchscreen gaming would become such a big deal when the DS ushered it in. And we won't see the next innovation interface coming either. I can see Nintendo coming up with the next innovation in controllers in this sense. I just don't know what it could possibly be to make consumers en masse embrace it as the next best thing. Also, there may still be untapped potential in technology that we already have that can be used to play games in ways that we haven't before. For instance, Nintendo hasn't used much of the IR sensor. What games could come from that? Same with HD Rumble or NFC outside of the typical amiibo use. Now, I know a lot of people immediately shut down when faced with the need to interact with games in a way that strays from the sticks and buttons approach that has become the norm, but I think if used in moderation and in tandem with current standards in the controller space, features like the IR sensor can add good things to game development in the same way that, despite the Wii U gamepad's poor reception in a general sense, people bemoan its absence in Super Mario Maker 2, which says to me, there's a use for everything when done in the right context. My final take on the question of whether or not a perfect controller is achievable is a bit bit of yes and a bit of no. I think there will be future controller innovations that are perfect for new game concepts in the same way that the Wiimote was perfect for Wii Sports, or for many how the GameCube controller is for Smash, or the Wii U gamepad for Mario Maker. But I don't think a singular controller could be perfect for all things. But I'll once again turn the question over to you guys. Do you think the perfect controller is possible? Let me know the answer to that in the poll up above and the reason why in the comments down below. Also, I want to know, what is your favorite controller to play games with? Personally, I'd have to say mine is the Xbox One controller. I prefer its layout, and the build quality is a little bit better than what is offered by the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Thanks for watching. Did you enjoy the video? Let me know by clicking the like button and once again leaving a comment and sharing with a friend who also is curious about this future of controllers business. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for new videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. New podcasts every Saturday on our podcast channel, linked in the description and in the card alongside that playlist I mentioned before. Go ahead and watch some more videos made by some cool people and also us. Okay, that's it for me. See you next week.